Now that we've covered the crawl stage, we're ready to walk. So building upon Pass 1 risk register, we take the output and we apply it in Pass 2 to the operating environment. Within ServiceNow, the operating environment is modeled as both entity types and entities with the linkage to relevant risk statements and control objectives. Example entities are applications, infrastructure, processes, and facilities. From there, we move to Pass 3, where we rapidly identify control capabilities using a survey attestation technique that we call diagnostics. In Pass 4 and 5, we then surgically hone in on the higher risk areas to judge control design adequacy and control operating effectively. Let's bring this to life with a live demo highlighting both the diagnostics and control testing. Jay?
Thanks, David. So we want to start by looking at a portal that we've built for clients in the past. These portals are a great way to engage your business stakeholders and those who are not regular everyday users of ServiceNow. This is a key tenet of that walk phase where we're now trying to involve other aspects of the business in our programs. So in this particular portal, just to give you a quick overview, we're able to keep track of any type of control assignments, any risks that have maybe been assigned to a business user, as well as any audits they may be participating in. They could come in and read any documented policies or standards, or request a policy exception against one of those. If the organization is also doing some vendor risk management activities, this can serve as a place to initiate that process, whether that's asking that a new vendor be onboarded, or that we do new business with an existing vendor. Ultimately, these portals can act as a one-stop shop for all things IRM or GRC, and vastly improve the user experience for your business stakeholders. One of the items we have here is the ability to participate in attestations and assessments. One of them we've built out here is a NIST cybersecurity specific diagnostic assessment. So this is really leveraging that cybersecurity assessment tool and really making sure that we're gathering the information from our business stakeholders that help us understand where risk may be present, where potentially we have compliance issues, and where we need to focus our efforts as we get into control documentation and ultimately control testing. These diagnostics leverage the core assessment and survey functionality in ServiceNow, and are incredibly powerful and dynamic. We can ask a series of questions here. We're asking, what is the impact and likelihood of these different things from a very low to very high scale? But we can do drop-down ratings. We could do free-form text. We can even do dependent question logic, whereby if they say that the impact is very high, I may want to ask a follow-on question to understand, what potentially would happen if this were to be realized. In addition to asking very meaningful and direct questions of our business stakeholders, we can build a scoring model to get you meaningful results. So, having these questions and their responses is part of the equation, but being able to have them submit this and be able to tell, we have potential risk issues as it relates to, asset inventory or some management ownership aspects, and being able to create issues for us to go and follow up, or minimally just creating notifications to let us know that we need to apply additional attention to that area. We work with clients to help build out these diagnostic assessments. These can be tailored to your regulatory applicability, making sure that we're covering off all those laws and regulations that ultimately you want to report compliance against. The other aspect of trying to determine, control compliance beyond a diagnostic approach would be through the use of control testing. And we're going to be looking at an audit engagement, which I've set up in advance of our discussion today. To quickly orient you to this record, along the top here, we have these chevrons, and these chevrons represent the high-level process that we'll be following for this control testing engagement. I've gone ahead and already completed the scoping exercise, but what we do here is we select which aspects of our business do we want to be assessing as part of this control testing engagement. Those could be various applications, business processes, functions, facilities, what have you. Once we've gone ahead and scoped the audit, we can validate that the scope is appropriate. And what happens is it's pulled in the 3 applications we want to focus our attention to and identified which risks, controls, and test plans are related to our in-scope assessment aspects. So we would work through and determine which of these control test plans would we like to execute. These are the plans in terms of how we would ultimately like to test this, but we would now get the opportunity to pick and choose which of these we want to execute today. So we can come through and select those that maybe we have a greater interest in performing a control test for, and we would select this button here, Generate Control Tests. And when we do, what happens is it takes these test plans and creates control tests, the point in time execution of these plans. This is our last opportunity to kind of put a little bit of a filter into what is ultimately the scope of our engagement. So I'm going to go ahead and click this Generate Control Test button, and it'll spin for just a moment. And we can see that our control tests have been generated. We can see under this Audit Task tab that we now have 9 different control tests that have been generated, and we'll show you what one of these looks like here in just a moment. In addition to having these control tests, we're able to document other tasks that may need to be performed as part of this control testing engagement. We can create tasks to be tracked as it relates to process walkthroughs, different stakeholder interviews, and any other activities that you're regularly performing as part of these engagements. The ultimate goal is to give you a consistent and repeatable process to make sure that each of these control testing engagements is handled in a similar way. We're going to look at one of these control tests, and we can see again that there's a high-level process for this control test. The first step is we need to assign this control test to someone from our team. Gordon was the individual who was managing this engagement, so we will go ahead and assign him as the owner of this control test. As part of this control test, Gordon would be asked to perform a design test. And we provide those assessment procedures here from the plan in a read-only format. The idea being we don't want to edit our assessment procedures while we're performing a control test. So the first step would be to perform that design assessment and determine is it effective or ineffective. In addition to determining the effectiveness, we would ask that design results be documented and potentially even some evidence be attached to this record so that we're able to keep track of any documents or artifacts that were gathered. We can see that we've marked this as an effective design, and our overall control effectiveness in the top right here has updated appropriately. If we were to come and perform our operation test and found that this control is not operating as intended, the overall control effectiveness is updated to ineffective. We would run this through a process to review it, make sure that any of the evidence gathered was appropriate. But if we were to get through that process and close out this control test in an ineffective state, a few things would happen. And the first is ServiceNow would update that control compliance rating, which ultimately fed into the compliance dashboards we saw during the crawl stage. And it would also create an issue for us to go and manage this control test failure. This allows us to make sure that we don't inadvertently forget to document an issue and make sure that we have a consistent process in terms of how we go about handling failed controlled tests. We can see now that it's been linked and that our control status here has been updated to a non-compliant stage. This issues management process now is our opportunity to go and respond, determine the impact, and really make sure that we are handling any issues as it relates to our attestation and certification of account control test failure. Just a brief overview here is we can respond to this through remediation efforts, assigning tasks to the organization to remedy the problem. We could pursue a policy exception, but ultimately we want to make sure that we are getting good metrics and reporting out of the system. So this issue is linked not only to our application for human resources and our failed non-compliant control, but it's linked to that control objective record, which will help us understand if we have thematic issues within the organization. Maybe we need to pursue an enterprise solution to a rather frequent recurring issue that we're seeing across multiple parts of our business. With that, I'll turn it back over to the team to jump into some of the questions that may have come in.
All righty. So first one, just want to make sure that this is understood. You're talking about your diagnostic testing, and then you're talking about your control testing. So the diagnostic testing is you need to find something very quickly. Maybe you're just trying to do a baseline assessment, readiness assessment, something comes in an RFP, you want to make sure that you can comply with that particular control. And then control testing is going to be your typical, operational effectiveness, design, et cetera, et cetera. Is that accurate? And when would you recommend using one or the other?
That's right. No, it's a great kind of point, Cliff, there. I think if you think back or look back to that 5-pass journey that David showed as well, we're admitting and acknowledging up front that the level of confidence when you're using a technique about yes, no, I don't know, or kind of that survey based and not evidence based, is going to be at a slightly lower confidence because you're not validating, if you will, through review of artifacts, that something is the case. So we have to acknowledge that up front. It's a good smoke test technique to solicit information. It's rapid as well. So from a user experience standpoint, it's a great way to solicit information and get it into the system. Theoretically, a lot of it you'd want to take for face value, but it's not at the same level as face value of doing a detailed control test, if you will, where you're saying, show me now, and let's go review those artifacts and make sure that we everyone's on the same page about what's being provided. So I think both techniques we do see play a role in everyone's risk and compliance program. And typically what we'll reserve is for the higher risk items at a minimum. Let's go make sure those highest risk ones, those are the ones that we're going to want to make sure that we're doing that control testing, show me type technique versus, more broadly, you can use a diagnostic survey. Some folks call them attestations, assessments, et cetera. There's a variety of different techniques that can be used in order to do that.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we're trying to do there is be able to quickly get information versus the more granular, now,
that's right,
not just give me the information, but then give me evidence of what you tell me.
Exactly right.
All right. And then, so how many can you run of one at a time? Is this something where you could run both a diagnostic and a control at the same time?
That's right. They can be run, simultaneously. You can run multiples and, of them at a time, both multiple diagnostic campaigns and multiple control testing campaigns. So there's no real limit, if you will, about how many you can be running and then being run in parallel. So there's a lot of options, if you will. Some folks are, have actually different flavors and types of diagnostics and assessment depending on what's being assessed. So if I'm assessing applications, I'm going to maybe use a different survey to go send out to folks versus if I'm testing for or assessing a business process cycle or a facility, so you would have different templates from a survey questionnaire standpoint that you'd be sending out. And then in parallel as well, you can be running a control testing campaign for your quarter, for your annual audit, whatever it is, at the same time.
And that kind of leads into the next question. Let me make sure I'm reading this one correctly. Appreciate you sending it in, Tim. So basically, are you automatically able to do alert management if a control is
Alert
so,
management, I think we saw, yeah, I saw that one come through. Yeah, I think you're spot on. That was in that gray box you and I spoke about earlier on the ServiceNow platform capabilities. You know, those are just some of the great native ServiceNow platform functionality, you know, with the workflows, if you will. So, you know, essentially at any step in the workflow, notifications can be sent first to let, you know, someone know that there's a task for them to complete. You know, then there is the follow-up, if you will, that, you know, they haven't opened that task or touched it or completed it during the due date. You know, they can be notified again and saying, oh, you have something waiting in your inbox. So there'll be a series of notifications set up from that perspective. There can be escalations, if you will, you know, so that if someone hasn't responded after giving them 2 tries or after 10 days or whatever you want to configure, you can escalate to their managers as well. So there's a lot of notification and escalation and reminder capabilities. Similarly, you can set up things that are called indicators. So if, you know, let's say we're going through that control test, if you will, and there was, you know, a risk that was created or an issue that was created that was of a critical or high severity, you know, you can trigger a notification, you know, to a stakeholder group that says, oh, we just created an issue and this is a critical issue, you know, so that would then alert people that, you know, something of sensitivity or criticality has been, you know, introduced or found, and then that can go trigger a follow-on workflow process as well. So even those follow-on notifications and workflows can be triggered based on the results of a diagnostic or a control test.
And we have one more question, but I actually think this is a really good segue into the next segment, because what you really just described was the beginnings of a lot of automation there. So
Perfect.
Something actually happening with the control one way or the other, and then that then turning into additional workflow or things happening in addition. It's almost like that branching item that we usually see.